The year is 301 AD. Rome, the greatest empire the world has ever known, is on its knees. Soldiers are deserting. Tax collectors are being murdered in the streets. The currency that once bought empires now can't buy a loaf of bread. And in a desperate move that would echo through history, Emperor Diocletian does something no ruler had ever attempted before. He tries to freeze the entire economy. Every price, every wage, every transaction in the empire. By law, and the punishment for breaking it? Death. This is the story of how Rome, the civilization that gave us roads, aqueducts, and the blueprint for Western government, became the victim of history's first documented hyperinflation. A financial catastrophe so complete, so devastating, that it would take 1,000 years for Europe to recover. And here's the crazy part. It all started with what seemed like the smartest decision any emperor ever made. Let me take you back to when Rome was still on top. Picture this. It's 64 AD. Emperor Nero is standing in his palace watching half of Rome burn to the ground. The Great Fire is consuming everything. Tens of thousands are homeless. The city is in ruins. And Nero has a problem. Not the fire itself, that's already done its damage. His problem is money. Rebuilding Rome is going to cost a fortune. An absolute fortune. And the treasury, it's running on fumes. So Nero calls in his advisors. And someone suggests something brilliant, something that had never been tried before on this scale. Why mint new coins when you can just change the old ones? Here's how Roman coins worked. A silver denarius, that was the currency everyone used, was supposed to be pure silver. Well, 95% silver, 5% copper, for durability. That was the standard. That was what made it valuable. That was what made it money. People trusted it because they knew exactly what was in their hands. But Nero had an idea. What if we make the coins bigger, but put less silver in them? What if instead of 95% silver, we drop it to 90%, or 85%? The coins would look the same, feel the same, weigh roughly the same. But each coin we mint would actually cost us less silver to make. Which means the same amount of silver could make more coins. Which means we could pay for everything we need, and nobody would even notice. Genius, right? Wrong. See, Nero made a mistake that countless governments would repeat for the next 2,000 years. He thought he could create value out of thin air. He thought nobody would figure it out. They figured it out. Within months, merchants started weighing coins, testing them, refusing the debased ones, or demanding more of them for the same goods. And here's where it gets wild. Once you start debasing currency, you can't stop. Because now you've set a precedent. Now every emperor who comes after you has the same solution to the same problem. Need to pay the army? Debase the currency? Need to build monuments? Debase the currency? Need to buy off potential rivals? Debase the currency? By 100 AD, the silver content had dropped to 80%. By 150 AD, 70%. Prices were starting to creep up across the empire, but slowly enough that most people just thought things were getting more expensive the way things always do. They didn't connect it to the coins in their pockets. But then the empire started falling apart. In the year 235 AD, Emperor Alexander Severus is murdered by his own troops. And for the next 50 years, a period historians literally call the crisis of the 3rd century, Rome goes into absolute chaos. 50 years? 50 years of civil war? At least 26 men claim to be emperor. Most of them die violent deaths within months of taking power. The borders are collapsing. Germanic tribes are pouring across the Rhine. Persians are conquering the east. The plague is sweeping through cities. Every single one of these emperors needs money. Desperately. The army demands payment, or they'll just find a new emperor who will pay them. So what do? They debase the currency even further. By 250 AD, the denarius is only 40% silver. By 260 AD, it's 5%. 5%. A coin that was supposed to be precious metal is now basically just copper with a silver coating. They're literally dipping copper coins in a thin layer of silver and hoping nobody notices. Guess what? Everybody notices. Merchants stop accepting government coins at face value. They start demanding payment in old coins, the ones from before the debasement. Or better yet, they want payment in goods. Wheat, wine, olive oil, anything real. Anything that won't lose half its value by next month. The money economy starts to collapse. People are going back to bartering like it's the Bronze Age. But here's the twist. It's about to get way worse, and nobody sees it coming. And here's the truly insane part. The government keeps making it worse. Hey, if you're already hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button. We're diving into some of the wildest economic disasters in history, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Now, there's this emperor named Aurelian who takes power in 270 AD. Tough guy, military genius. He actually manages to reunite most of the empire, beat back the barbarians, and stabilize the borders. People start calling him restorer of the world, but he inherits this absolute nightmare of a currency system. The coins are so debased they're practically worthless. Inflation is out of control. The economy is in shambles. So Aurelian tries to fix it. He issues a new coin, the Aurelianus. And he claims, he promises, that this one will hold its value. This one is different. This one you can trust. It's 5% silver, just like the coin it's replacing. He's changed nothing except the name and added some marketing. And people aren't stupid. They don't trust it. Why would they? They've been burned over and over again. But Aurelian has bigger problems. In 271, the mint workers in Rome go on strike. They are pissed because, and this is pretty wild, they've been skimming silver from the coins they were supposed to be minting. That's their side hustle. That's how they supplement their income in this inflation-ravaged economy. Aurelian finds out and tries to stop them, so they revolt. The mint workers, backed by their supporters, actually seize control of part of Rome. They're literally fighting the emperor's soldiers in the streets. Aurelian has to bring in the army to crush them. 7,000. Over debased coins that are already nearly worthless. That's how bad things have gotten. People are dying in the streets, fighting over the right to steal from money that's already fake. And prices? Prices are going absolutely berserk. A modius of wheat that's about 8 liters, enough to feed a person for a week, used to cost half a denarius in the year 200 AD. By 270 AD, it costs 200 denarii. That's a 400 times increase in 70 years. But remember, the denarius has also lost 90% of its silver content in that time. So in real terms, in terms of actual silver, the price has gone up 4,000 times. 4,000 times. Imagine if your rent went from $1,000 to $4 million in your lifetime. That's what Romans were experiencing, and it's about to get so much worse. Most people don't know this part, but there's a letter that survives from this period. A merchant in Egypt writing to his business partner. He's complaining about how he can't keep up with the price changes. He says he's raising his prices every single day now, every day. And it's still not enough, because by the time he sells his goods and takes the coins to buy more inventory, those coins have lost value. He's making sales and somehow losing money on every transaction. This is the monetary equivalent of quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. And then Diocletian takes power. It's 284 AD, and Diocletian is not your typical emperor. He's not from a noble family. He's the son of a slave, worked his way up through the military ranks through pure competence and ruthlessness. And when he becomes emperor, he looks at the absolute disaster he's inherited, and he does something radical. He decides to completely reorganize the entire Roman Empire. First, he splits the empire into 4 parts, each with its own ruler. The Tetrarchy, it's called. He's the senior emperor in the east. His buddy Maximian is senior emperor in the west. 2 junior emperors below them. The theory is this will make the empire more governable, harder for barbarians to invade, and reduce civil wars because there's already a clear succession plan. Pretty smart, actually. It kind of works for a while. But Diocletian's real problem, the problem that's destroying everything, is the currency, and he knows it, so he tries to fix it. In 294 AD, he issues a new gold coin, the solidus. And this one he swears this one is the real deal. Solid gold. 62 a pound of gold. Standardized, reliable. This will be the coin of the empire going forward. And you know what? People actually do trust the solidus, because it's real. It's actual gold. You can verify it. It holds its value. For the next 700 years, the solidus will be the most trusted currency in the Mediterranean world. But here's the problem. There's not enough gold to run an entire economy on gold coins alone. Gold is for big transactions, government payments, international trade. What about regular people? What about the daily transactions that make an economy function? For that, you still need smaller denomination coins. Silver, bronze, copper, and those coins, still debased, still losing value, still feeding the inflation monster. So prices keep rising and rising and rising. Diocletian watches his reformed currency system fail in real time. Gold coins work great for the wealthy, for the government, for the army, but everyone else is still drowning. Bakers can't afford wheat. Carpenters can't afford wood. Soldiers' salaries paid in the debased coins can't buy food. The tax system is collapsing because by the time taxes are collected and reach the central government, the money is worthless. The empire is literally disintegrating because nobody can buy or sell anything with any certainty about what things will cost tomorrow. And Diocletian, watching all this, makes a decision that will become one of the most infamous economic policies in history. If we can't fix the money, he thinks, we'll fix the prices. If inflation means prices are rising uncontrollably, we'll just make it illegal for prices to rise. We'll freeze the entire economy in place. On November 20th, 301 AD, Diocletian issues the edict on maximum prices. And this thing is insane. It's a list of over 1,000 goods and services with their maximum legal prices, everything from wheat to silk to wages for school teachers. Every single thing you can buy or sell in the Roman Empire now has a government-mandated price ceiling. And the edict doesn't just suggest these prices. It's not a guideline. It's the law. And the penalty for violating it? Death. You charge 1 coin more than the legal price for wheat? Death. You pay your worker 1 coin more than the legal wage? Death. You try to hoard goods to wait for prices to rise? Death. The edict itself is actually kind of beautiful in a twisted way. It's carved into stone monuments across the empire. Some of them still exist. You can go see them in museums. In the preamble, you've got to hear this. The preamble is Diocletian explaining why he's doing this. He talks about greedy merchants, about soldiers who can't afford food, about the suffering of the common people. He positions himself as the protector of the poor against the exploitation of the rich. It's propaganda, obviously. But here's the twist. Diocletian probably believes it. He genuinely thinks this will work. He thinks the problem is greed, that merchants are price gouging. That if he can just force everyone to be reasonable, the economy will stabilize. He doesn't understand that he's treating the symptom instead of the disease. For a few months, maybe it seems like it's working. Prices stop rising publicly. The government can point to the edict and say, look, we fixed it. Inflation is over. And if you're just looking at the official markets, it might even seem true. But here's what's actually happening. Goods are vanishing from the markets. Why would a farmer bring wheat to the city if he's forced to sell it at a price lower than his cost to produce it? Why would a merchant stock goods he's legally required to sell at a loss? Why would anyone engage in commerce when commerce is a guaranteed path to bankruptcy? So they don't. They hide their goods. They sell on the black market. They barter in secret. Hoard. The official economy, the one governed by Diocletian's edict, becomes a ghost town. Meanwhile, an entire shadow economy springs up where prices are 10 times, 20 times higher than the legal maximum. And the government responds with violence. Price inspectors fan out across the empire. They raid warehouses. They execute merchants. They torture people to find out where goods are hidden. Punishment is death, and they're not shy about carrying it out. But you can't execute your way to economic prosperity. Every merchant killed is one less person participating in the economy. Every warehouse seized is one less source of goods. The enforcement of the price controls makes the shortage worse, which makes the black market more profitable, which makes the enforcement more brutal, which makes the shortage worse. It's a death spiral. And here's the truly dark part. The edict doesn't even apply to everyone equally. The government still needs to acquire goods. The army still needs to be fed. So the state starts just taking what it needs. They call it taxation, but it's really confiscation. If you're a farmer, the government shows up and takes a portion of your grain. It's not pays for it. It takes it. Because why would they pay when the money is worthless anyway? This creates a new system. Historians call it taxation in kind. The government assesses your ability to produce and then demands a certain amount of physical goods as tax. You're a farmer? You're a craftsman? You're a craftsman? You owe tools or clothes or pottery. The money economy hasn't just collapsed, it's been abandoned, and people can't escape their professions anymore. Because the tax system requires you to stay in your job. If you're born a baker, you die a baker. If you're born a farmer, you die a farmer. The government needs predictable production to feed the army in the cities, so they make it illegal to change professions. They make it illegal to leave your land. They make it illegal to move to a different city. This is serfdom. This is the economic system that will define the Middle Ages, and it's being born right here, right now, from the ashes of Roman hyperinflation. If you're still with me, this is exactly why I make these videos, to show how historical events shape the world we live in today. So do me a favor and smash that like button, and subscribe if you haven't already. There's so much more to this story. By 305 AD, Diocletian is exhausted. He spent 21 years trying to hold the empire together, and in an almost unprecedented move for a Roman emperor, he voluntarily retires. Just walks away, goes to live in a palace in Croatia, tends to his garden, and watches the empire he tried to save tear itself apart, because the tetrarchy, it fails immediately. Within a year of Diocletian's retirement, civil war erupts. The four rulers turn on each other. Various generals and politicians claim the throne. And for the next 18 years, it's chaos again. The empire fragments. Different regions have different rulers claiming to be the legitimate emperor. Constantine emerges from this chaos. Constantine the Great, the guy who would convert the empire to Christianity. It's the guy who would move the capital from Rome to Constantinople. One of the most important figures in Western history. And one of the first things Constantine does, he maintains the solidus that gold coin Diocletian created. Because unlike the debased silver and copper coins, the solidus actually works. It's real money. People trust it. But Constantine also realizes something Diocletian didn't. You can't run an empire on price controls and confiscation. You need a functioning economy. So he quietly lets the edict on maximum prices die, just stops enforcing it. The shadow economy becomes the real economy again, but the damage is done. The money economy never really recovers, not in the Western Empire anyway. For the next 200 years, trade keeps declining, cities keep shrinking. The tax system keeps relying more and more on confiscation rather than actual taxation. The professional restrictions become hereditary. If your father was a baker, you're a baker. If your grandfather was a soldier, you're a soldier. Rome has become a command economy held together by force. And then the Western Empire falls. In 476 AD, the last emperor is deposed by a Germanic chieftain, and Europe enters the period we call the Dark Ages. And one of the defining characteristics of the Dark Ages is the collapse of the money economy. People go back to bartering. Trade declines. Long-distance commerce nearly vanishes. The sophisticated financial systems Rome had built over centuries, banking, credit, investment, they all disappear. And it takes almost 1,000 years for Europe to recover. Now here's where this story gets really interesting. Because the Eastern Empire, what we call the Byzantine Empire, they survive. They keep going for another 1,000 years. And you want to know what they do differently? They maintain the solidus. They never debase it. For 700 years, the Byzantine solidus remains 62 a pound of gold, exactly reliably, every single time. And because people can trust the currency, commerce flourishes. Constantinople becomes the wealthiest city in the world. The Byzantines developed sophisticated financial instruments, banking, letters of credit, international trade networks, same empire, same culture, same language. The difference is, they learned the lesson Rome failed to learn. Sound money is the foundation of everything else. Debase the currency, and you destroy the economy. Maintain sound money and prosperity is possible. But here's the crazy part, and I mean really crazy. The lesson gets forgotten. Over and over and over again throughout history, every empire, every government, every civilization eventually faces a financial crisis and thinks we can just debase the currency a little bit. Nobody will notice. Medieval Europe. Constant debasement. Every king clips coins, reduces precious metal content, creates new currencies that are worth less than the old ones. China, in the 13th century, they invent paper money. And within decades, they're printing so much of it that hyperinflation destroys the Mongol Yuan dynasty. They have to abandon paper money entirely for centuries. Revolutionary France? The assignat, paper money backed by confiscated church lands, starts out worth its face value in gold. In 4 years, it's lost 99% of its value. French economy collapses. You know what comes after that? Napoleon, dictatorship, war, Weimar Germany. After World War I, they print money to pay war reparations and finance government spending. In 1922, a loaf of bread costs 163 marks. In 1923, it costs 200 billion marks. People are literally using money as wallpaper because it's cheaper than buying wallpaper. You know what comes after that? Hitler, Zimbabwe in the 2000s. They print money to finance government spending. Inflation reaches 89.76 billion % per year. They end up issuing a $100 trillion bill. Eventually, they abandon their currency entirely and just start using US dollars and South African rand. The story is always the same. A government faces a crisis. They need money. They can't raise taxes enough because that's politically unpopular and economically difficult. They can't cut spending because that means laying off soldiers or ending popular programs, so they debase the currency. They print money. They think we'll just do it a little bit, just to get through this crisis, and it never works, because once you start, you can't stop. Each round of debasement makes the next round necessary. Prices rise, so you need more money to pay for the same things, so you debase more, so prices rise more, so you need more money. It's a loop, a trap. And the only way out is to either restore sound money, which is politically almost impossible because it requires painful economic adjustment, or to collapse completely and start over. Rome tried a third option: price controls, forced labor, a command economy, and it destroyed them anyway. Just took longer and was more painful. Now look, I'm not an economist, and I'm not here to push any particular modern political view. But the historical pattern is undeniable. Sound money, money that maintains its value that people can trust, is the foundation of a functioning economy. And when governments destroy that trust, when they debase or print or manipulate their currency, the consequences are catastrophic, every single time. And here's what really gets me about the Roman story. They didn't have to do it. At the beginning, in Nero's time, Rome was rich, insanely rich. They controlled the entire Mediterranean. They had the wealth of Egypt, the trade of the East, the mines of Spain. They could have maintained sound money. They could have raised taxes if they needed more revenue. They could have cut spending if revenues fell. They had options. But debasement was easier. It was politically easier to make the coins slightly less valuable than to tell people they had to pay more taxes or receive fewer government services. It was easier to steal value from everyone slowly through inflation than to make hard choices about priorities and spending. And once they started, they couldn't stop. Because every emperor who tried to restore sound money faced an impossible situation. To stabilize the currency, you have to stop debasement. But stopping debasement means you can't fund the government, which means you have to either massively raise taxes or massively cut spending. And either of those things will make you so unpopular, you'll probably get assassinated. So you keep debasing. And the next emperor inherits an even worse situation, and the cycle continues. By the time Diocletian took power, there were no good options left, just bad ones and worse ones. Price controls were a bad option. But the alternative was to let inflation continue unchecked, which meant the complete collapse of the money economy, mass starvation, civil war, and the disintegration of the empire. Most people Dante know this next part. It completely changes how we think about Rome's collapse, so he chose price controls. And it failed anyway, just slower. There's this moment I think about sometimes. It's 270 AD. Emperor Aurelian is celebrating his victory over the Palmyrene Empire. He's just reconquered the eastern provinces, united most of Rome, defeated the enemies on every border. He's at the height of his power. He's being called restorer of the world, and he holds a triumph in Rome. That is a big parade where the victorious general shows off all the conquered peoples and loot to the public. It's the highest honor in Rome, and Aurelian's triumph is spectacular. Elephants, exotic animals, captured queens in golden chains, wagons full of treasure. But here's what's wild. The treasure includes cartloads of the debased coins they captured from Palmyra, coins that are basically worthless. but they're paraded through the streets like they're a prize of war. The audience watches these wagons of fake money roll by, and they cheer, because they don't fully understand yet what's happened to their currency. They see a wagon full of coins and think it's wealth. It's not wealth. It's a symbol of the rot that's destroying their civilization from within. But they don't see it.
Ow.
They can't see it. The inflation has been so gradual, spread over so many decades that it seems normal. This is just what money is now, and that's the scariest part of the whole story. People living through it mostly didn't understand what was happening. They knew prices were rising, they knew money didn't buy what it used to, but they blamed merchants, blamed foreigners, they blamed each other. They didn't understand that the problem was the currency itself. Their government had been slowly robbing them of their purchasing power for generations. The few people who did understand, the wealthy elite who could hoard precious metals, who could invest in land and real assets, they protected themselves. They got richer while everyone else got poorer. Because inflation is a regressive tax. It hurts the poor and middle class the most. The people who can't protect themselves, who have to spend their money as soon as they earn it, who don't have assets that appreciate along with inflation. The wealthy had gold, had estates, had goods that held their value. The poor had wages that were fixed and savings that evaporated. Every round of debasement made the inequality worse. By the time of Diocletian, Rome had gone from a society with a prosperous middle class to one where most people were barely surviving while a tiny elite controlled almost everything. Sound familiar? Look, I'm not saying modern America or Europe or anywhere else is exactly like late Rome. We have different economic systems, different technologies, different political structures. Our central banks are independent. Our currencies are fiat, meaning they're not backed by precious metals at all. The situations aren't identical, but the temptation is the same. When governments face crises, when they need money they don't have, the easiest option is always to just create more money, to run the printing press, to debase the currency. In the short term it works. You can pay your debts, fund your programs, keep everyone happy. But in the long term, you're Rome, you're Weimar Germany, you're revolutionary France, you're Zimbabwe. The story always ends the same way. The Roman Empire, this civilization that had lasted for centuries, that had conquered the known world, that had built monuments that still stand today, was brought down by many things. Barbarian invasions, political instability, military overextension. But underneath all of it, funding all of it, making all of it worse, was the slow-motion destruction of their currency. Inflation didn't just destroy the economy, it destroyed trust. And once people don't trust the money, they don't trust the markets. And once they don't trust the markets, they don't trust the government. And once they don't trust the government, the whole thing falls apart. The crisis of the 3rd century. The price controls, the command economy, the fall of the Western Empire. The Dark Ages. All of it traces back to Nero looking at a pile of coins and thinking, what if we just put a little less silver in them? That's the lesson. That's the warning from history. Sound money matters. Not because money itself matters, but because it's the foundation that everything else is built on. Commerce, trade, specialization, cities, culture, civilization itself. And when you destroy the foundation, everything built on top of it comes crashing down. So yeah, Rome went broke. It's not because they ran out of gold or silver. It's not because they were conquered by barbarians. They went broke because for 300 years, emperor after emperor chose the easy option over the right one. Chose short-term survival over long-term prosperity. Chose to steal value from their citizens slowly through inflation rather than make hard choices about taxation and spending. And by the time someone tried to fix it, it was too late. The damage was done. The empire was doomed. If you've made it this far, thank you. Seriously, this is the kind of deep historical story that explains so much about how the world works today. If you want more content like this, hit subscribe and drop a comment, letting me know what financial disaster from history you want me to cover next. There are so many wild stories to tell. Rome fell, but the lessons remain. The question is whether we're willing to learn them.